Any questions? Please make sure to keep your video on and feel free to ask any questions in the chat about the content. Nakia Melecio has devoted his career to helping researchers in commercializing their cutting-edge technologies. His expertise extends to securing investments from laboratories, universities, and corporations. As a business advisor, tech mentor, and startup coach, Nakia's passion lies in inspiring and guiding entrepreneurs and startups that have started from university research. He empowers startups to navigate their journeys. Nakia's impact is truly global, having worked with over 700 startups worldwide and more than 15,000 hours of classroom time dedicated to working with entrepreneurs. And he has a lot of expertise in this field. Please welcome Mr. Nakia Melecio.
Good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Hopefully I've had the opportunity to capture all of those. Hey, listen, I am super excited to be here with you all to share some profound but yet very practical tools in terms of how do you begin to think about the idea of building a startup or just advancing your startup, starting with just the basics of just using a wonderful tool called the Business Model Canvas. And so I'm going to walk through a bit of a storyboarding, share a little bit about what that looks like. And hopefully by the end of this, if nothing else, we will kind of push you towards say, hey, I haven't thought about that, or maybe I should think about this. And so looking forward to sharing this presentation with you all today as we jump into it. But as you mentioned before, please make sure that you're on mute so that everyone can effectively hear the presentation. Now, however, I won't be able to see the chat while you're asking your questions, but we'll leave enough time towards the end of the presentation to answer your questions. And again, my name is Nakia Melecio, and I work here at Georgia Tech here in the United States. So let's dive into it. So again, I'm going to talk to you about Lean Startup. But before we do that, I want to give you a little bit of context about what Lean Startup is. And without going into the whole long story, it's really about a methodology and how do you take something that's really complex and use a practical, simple process to build something that could be very successful. When you think in tradition of most business plans, you do some numbers, you do some Google searches, you find some information, you construct this plan, but there's one element that's missing, the actual voice of the customer, and really not listening to the customer. So when you take the Lean Startup methodology and you couple that with customer discovery, and you understand the use and the tool of the business model canvas, you can effectively, efficiently build something that will eventually be a success to all customers. So we're going to walk through, again, how do we leverage the Lean Startup methodology to build a successful startup? But again, it starts with our in-depth understanding of the problem we're trying to solve, but how do we use the tool to do that? There are several other books that are associated with the Lean Startup methodology, such as the Business Model Generation, the Startup's Owner's Manual, and Talking to Humans. The purpose of customer discovery, again, and how do we leverage the Lean Startup methodology is to get away from our own assumptions around what we believe or think the customer has as a problem, but to really dive deeply into really talking to people to better understand. And we use this thing called the scientific method to do that. And you may say, why are we using the scientific method? Well, the purpose of the scientific method is because when you think of you running a scientific experiment, you craft a hypothesis, you run that experiment, then you analyze those results to see whether or not the experiment was a success. And so much like customer discovery, we run and use the same scientific method. But in this case, our experiment is talking to humans or talking to people. And it starts with a conversation to understand what are their existing problems, to how can we best help them and solve them. So what are you saying in terms of, well, what is the scientific method? When we think of the scientific method applied to entrepreneurship, it starts off with three fundamental things. What's the problem do you think your technology solves? Who do you think has the problem, which is the customer? Why do you think it's valuable to solve it? And this all starts with, again, with a bunch of guesses. We start off with a bunch of guesses around hypothesis. Again, we conduct the experiments by talking to customers. We're looking to validate or invalidate our hypothesis, which is basically a set of assumptions or beliefs. We don't know whether they're true or not until we actually talk to customers. You take what you've learned and you iterate further, and it's not about creating a venture. I want to make sure that we're clear on that, but it's about understanding. We're trying to make sure that we understand uniquely, are we truly solving the problem that the customer actually cares about? And it's about collecting evidence to inform our decision making as we navigate through the process. So when we think of the scientific method or we apply evidence-based entrepreneurship, it looks something like this. So let's kind of dive into a little bit of a scientific class, so to speak, but from an entrepreneurship perspective. When we think about evidence-based entrepreneurship equaling the scientific method, it's about starting out with a statement of a hypothesis around the problem we think the customer has or the problem that we're trying to solve. What you'll hear during the customer discovery process is not so much the technology or the solution or the service or the product that you've created. It's not so much that that's not important. It's very much so important. But what we're trying to understand through this evidence-based entrepreneurship model is we're trying to figure out the solution that we build. Is it really the thing that's going to solve the problem the customers actually have? So we start out with, again, hypothesizing, testing, talking to customers. We get this feedback in, and our objective is to kind of analyze those results. As we analyze those results, we come to some conclusion, whether or not we're heading in the right direction, or perhaps we need to negate the hypothesis and perhaps start over again, right? Looking for a better understanding because we might pivot, but pivots are not just based on, well, we don't feel like, or we don't think, or we're not sure if we're heading in the right direction. Pivots are usually based off of evidence, being the operative word from what you learn from these individual customers. So how does it begin the process of what you're trying to learn? Well, it starts off with, again, what you're hypothesizing around. What is it that you want to learn? Or here's what we thought in terms of the problem that you're trying to solve. The experiment is here's what we wanted to learn and what we asked of the potential customers during interviews. Then the results and insights, or here's what we wanted to learn, and then the actions, here's what we do next, but based on what we individually learn. Now, again, the premise of this is to make sure that we're uniquely solving the problem that the customers actually care about. And I want to let that sink in for a second. Because way too often, out of all the startups that I work with, they want to build the solution, they want to build the technology, build the solution, and then they want to build the problem, then go look for the solution, or vice versa, right? They want to build the thing and then go see if people actually want it, as opposed to seeing what the people care about, and then perhaps going and building or going back and altering the thing that you actually built. There are several ways and things that we go about this. But one of the things that I also would like to say is when you're thinking about customer discovery, to maybe combine into the discovery some of these questions. I like the Porter's 5 forces, some things that really help you to think about the magnitude of the issues or the problems you're trying to solve. When you think about how easy is it for new businesses to set up shop, you got to kind of examine the new threats or new entries that could potentially come against you or your potential competitors and really assess what's happening in the market. And then the second one, how much power do customers actually have in bargaining power or buying power, or what do they have an understanding of that? You have to think thoroughly, again, not just assessing the problem, but also what are the other incumbents in the market as well too. So you're not just doing customer discovery around one individual, but you're doing it around a whole group of individuals, an ecosystem, because you're trying to displace incumbents because you believe your solution or technology perhaps could be the better one. And then how much power do suppliers have, the bargaining power of suppliers inside your ecosystem? And the reason I'm adding this into the form of customer discovery, because not only do we want to understand the customer, but we want to understand the market, the ecosystem, and everything that's attached to that as well. And then threats of substitutes. How likely are customers to switch to an alternative? Meaning, will they switch from something that you've created? Or if there's an incumbent that you're trying to displace, will they switch from them to you? How likely are they to do that? And are there any other substitutes that you have to compete and contend with? This goes again, trying to refine your value that you're trying to offer. But before we get into that, it's about understanding, right? It's not about creating the venture, but it's about understanding what's happening in the market. Then understanding the intensity of the competitive rivalry. Or I would like to say, how many firms compete, or how much is the market growing in the area that you're trying to build a business in? All these things help us, again, to better understand the customer, the market, the ecosystem. And this is why lean startup is so powerful, because it puts you in the here's in the ecosystem, and it surrounds you around the problem, as opposed to saying, here, I built the thing, therefore you should want it because I built it and it's great. It's about understanding what the customers are needing and wanting. When you think about the market for a particular good and services is made up of existing and other potential customers who need it, are aware of it, and have the ability and the willingness to pay for it. It's your job to do customer discovery to find out what is it that they're willing to pay for with your in-depth understanding of the problem. But most businesses start off with, again, trying to find the right business model. In this case, we're going to use the business model canvas, and I'm going to unpack what that looks like. Most startups start off, again, trying to build something, but they start off with the understanding first of how do we do customer discovery to understand the customer, to make sure that we can in turn validate that customer. There is a fundamental difference between startups and actual companies. Startups are always in a search mode, trying to find the right business model, and companies are in a mode of creating companies or customer creation. They're in the business of executing on their idea. So many of you kind of start here with a core idea. You're not quite sure where that idea is going to go, or you're not sure exactly what it will be. And this was the premise of, again, why we come back to customer discovery. It's about questions. Do people really care about the idea or the technology, or is there a real problem out there that we can actually solve? So as we start about understanding the core idea, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we really go out through this pathway to validate the thing that we're trying to build. But the question is what if you're wrong? See, if you put in a business plan that you have all the answers and then you try to execute without true facts, well, you didn't give yourself the opportunity to really do customer discovery enough to talk to people to see whether or not the thing that you're trying to build or solve is really worth solving, or if you even have the wrong solution. So think about that. What if you're wrong? If you make the assumption and go build something without talking to people, that is a very strong likelihood. In the business world, we call that a pivot, right? But a pivot is honestly based off of facts and evidence and information that you learn from these customers. Because the goal of pivoting is to make sure to pivot from one place to the next. For instance, for those who want to use a basketball analogy, let's think of, many of you probably heard of the great late Kobe Bryant, who was probably one of the best basketball players on the planet, who was notoriously known for a pivot. When we think of a pivot, the objective of the basketball player is to come down the court, dribble the ball, find the hoop, shoot the ball, make sure the ball goes in the hoop and the net, and either score 2 points or 3 points, depending on where they're positioned on the court. Now, sometimes there's an obstruction, or there's something that's in the lane of that basketball player from getting to the hoop. And so therefore, the basketball player needs an alternative. So therefore, the objective to that alternative is to pivot to put the player in a better position to score. Now, think of that from the business perspective. Sometimes you have evidence that says you're going one direction, but then there's another anomaly or a piece of evidence that says we should go in this direction because that will be a better option for you in terms of scoring. And this is what customer discovery does for you. It allows evidence to support why you're heading in the right direction when you're making these actual pivots. So it's a continuous process of customer discovery and customer validation to ensure that you do have the right business model. And so everything rises and falls and starts with customer discovery. And we use this wonderful tool called the business model canvas. There's these 9 boxes, and I'm going to explain what each of these 9 boxes mean as we kind of navigate through. But these 9 boxes, there's nothing magical about them, but when you use customer discovery, they really help you to uniquely understand the problem that you're trying to solve in a deep and intimate way. Because most startups think you just have the idea and you just go straight to deployment. But reality is that it more or less looks like this. You have an idea, then you have all kinds of uncertainty, lots of up, downs, lots of turmoil, and you think you're heading in the right direction, but then you're not. This is why we use the business model canvas as a tool. It becomes a tool to help vet the idea, talk to the customer, understand the problem deeply, broadly, and intimately so that we can make sure that we're able to build something that is successful. And hopefully you will go through several of the business model canvases in customer discovery before you get to the place of actually building something that people actually want to show you the clear pathway to actually deployment. So once again, this is where we start. We start out with this tool called the business model canvas. But first, we must identify what we like to call a customer segment. And that customer segment is everybody that we're building the business around and trying to assess value. So it's important that you identify who that person is that you're creating the product or the service for, no matter what the technology is, whether you're building something in AI, whether you're building a new medical device, whether you're building something, finding a new novel drug, or you've got some new novel way to design a t-shirt, or you've got some new AI solution to improve something. It's about how do we understand this customer and what do they need, and how do we go about building that solution for them. The business model canvas is broken into 3 quadrants. It starts out with the desirable, feasible, and viable. Most time, you'll spend most of your time in the desirable side. That's understanding who the customer is, the value that you deliver to that customer. And the reason you start off this first, because it's impossible to really build out the business model or identify what your financial model will look like without understanding who you're building it for, the value you offer the customer, and the price and the problem that you're trying to solve for the customer. And I will say this, startups don't fail because they fail to make something. Startups fail because they fail to make something someone wants to buy from them. And this is why this tool helps you not only to vet the idea or the problem, but to vet to make sure that you're building the right thing for the right person. So again, it's important to us as we think about the business model canvas, how do we come back to a place of trying to understand why do they buy and who are they and will they buy from us and why are they buying from us? You got to have a process, a methodology around vetting out the idea to ensuring that you're heading in the right direction. Hence the term why we use the business model canvas. Everything about the customer, you have to keep your focus here. Focus on what this person needs, what him or her needs. The more you understand this, the better you will be. Because building any successful business or startup, again, remember, you have to start with the human because it's all about the human when we're building and desiring things. So as I mentioned before, it's about an understanding of the desirable, feasibility, and the viability of our business. Is it desirable? Do customers care about it? Is it feasible? Do we have the infrastructure and the support to do this? Is it viable? Do we have the resources? Do we have the right business model, the right pricing? All those things to build something that will be successful. Every successful startup, again, is focused on how do they connect the dots with using the business model canvas. Everything starts with the desirable side because we're trying to understand how does this customer care about, or why do they care about, or when do they need a new solution? Because the problem or the technology that they're using now doesn't work for them. And what is the criteria that this person goes through when determining that they need a new solution or they need a new technology? How do we navigate? How do we go about the process of being able to vet this out? This is why the business model canvas and this tool becomes so effective when we're trying to build a sustainable model. Now, we know that you have the idea, you want to go straight to deployment, and you want the customer to buy it. But oftentimes, again, it's not quite that simple. So as we think about the core idea, it becomes important for us to understand not only who these people we're selling to, but what is the value we're trying to sell to them? And then how do we know when they need a new solution? And then what is the metrics or what do they think and how do they go about identifying and raising their hand and saying, hey, I need a new solution? So this is why everything on the business model canvas starts with our understanding of the customer segment and the value propositions. Again, in a few moments, I'm going to explain what each of these boxes mean so you can have context in terms of why we do this. So the first order of business is to understand who will be my customer and what is their problem as we begin to think through how do we solve the problem for this customer. When we think about customer questions or we're trying to identify a business model, there might be perhaps a few questions that we can ask, like what does your customer buy to solve the problem today? How does your customer currently pay for the product and service today? With what frequency do they use to purchase it? Is services included or expected? Just general questions and things that some, not all, but some that you can ask to begin to vet out who your potential customers are. Again, when we look, we're trying to search for a business model and why we use the tool, the business model canvas, and why lean startup is so important because it becomes about a race to the bottom to find the right business model for us to be able to grow and for us to be able to scale. So it becomes again the question some of you might have, well, what's a business model? And how do we begin to identify that? When we think about the business model canvas, everything is interconnected. And once I explain how each of these boxes work, it'll help you to understand how and why these things are so interconnected to each other. But there's one key component in the customer relationship, what we describe as the get, keep, grow. There's a process to get a customer, keep a customer, and grow the customer. The get customer is around the awareness, the activation piece. The keeping the customer is around loyalty programs. How do you keep them inside your customer base? And then the grow, the upsell, the adding new products, new features. It's a viral loop. So that's why you see the wheel on the business model canvas at the customer because it becomes important once you identify the customer and the value and being able to build a business. So why do we use this tool? Well, it's how a company creates and delivers and captures value. It's how we use this to build something successful. So this business model canvas, again, helps you in terms of organization. It helps you to identify what are some of the critical key things that you're thinking about. But I like to call it your laboratory notebook, right? And let's even simplify it a little further. So when we think about the business model canvas, the green is everything that's outward facing, and the red is kind of all the back end, the operational things. Or let me put it to you a little bit this way. Think of it like a play or a theater. When you think of the right side of the canvas, like the stage, the actors, everything that people see of all the months of hard work to put on the play, that's everything everyone sees. The backstage is kind of like all the understudies, the acting, the hours of practice and the foundation and the reading the scripts. Those are the things that you see that are behind the scenes in terms of the business model. And so when you think of the business model canvas, but it all supports around every movie has a lead actor. And in this case, in the business model context, the lead actor is the customer segments or customer segment. And it's important that you understand who that person is if you want to build a successful play and or movie with your startup. So again, when we think about the customer segment, now let's unpack what these 9 boxes mean. So the customer segment is who is your most important customers? What are their archetypes? And what jobs are you getting done for them? What is the persona of that person? Who are they? Are they male? Are they female? Are they an executive? Are they an engineer? Who is the person? When we say customer segment, that's who we're identifying. If it's a B2B, meaning a business to business, that person usually has a title like chief of product development that works inside an organization. They have a job to be done, and the current solution that they're doing doesn't help them achieve that. So that's what I mean by identifying a customer segment that can help us understand what that means. And then the value proposition. What customers' problems are you helping to solve? What value and needs are you helping to satisfy for that customer? Now, value propositions are very difficult to get, and it's important that we identify why they're hard to get because we have to separate this thing from product features to get to a place of product benefits. So when we think about identifying value propositions, again, this is the difficult part because the value is not the thing that you label, but it's the thing that the customers perceive as value. They have a solution or something that they're doing now that doesn't work for them, that's causing them pain, causing them money, whatever the solution may be. Your job and objective is to make sure that your value, your business and your solution offers the benefit that they're looking for them to be able to grow and to scale. When we think about the channel aspect, they're on the business model canvas. The channels is through which sales, distribution, and support do your customers want to be reached? Meaning, how does your product get from you to your customers? Do you sell online? Do you sell in stores? Do you sell it to, do your product go to someone else and they sell it for you? That's the channel. That's the distribution and how you get your product from point A to point B as you think through that. Then we think through, again, back to the customer relationship, is to get, keep, grow. How will you get, keep, and grow your customers when you're thinking through the dynamics of onboarding your customers? All these 9 boxes literally help you to build out a successful, sustainable business. Then when we think about how will you make money? What is the revenue model? What is the pricing tactics? All of these 9 boxes to get to understanding, again, everything first starts with the customer segment and the value. It's about trying to understand so that you can build something that will eventually be successful. And then the left side of the canvas, what are the key activities do you require? Do you require manufacturing, software, concierge services? What are those day-to-day activities that have to happen in your business for it to be a success and for it to thrive and for it to be completely and truly functional? And then what are the key resources that are required? Do you require financial? Do you require physical buildings? Do you require space? What is it that your business needs? What is the key critical resource that's needed and or required for your business to be functional? And then key partners. Who are your key partners? Who are your key suppliers? What are you getting from them? And what are you giving them? Now I'm going to segue again on partners like I did value proposition, because sometimes some businesses do require partners to get your product from point A to point B. You may have a product or a solution that is valuable to a customer, but then you don't have access to the channel and a customer or a partner does. And so partnerships can become important. But when we think about these 3 boxes on the business model canvas, they often get quite confused between these 3 boxes. When we think through in terms of key partners, key resources, and activities, some people say, well, can't the partner do all these things and provide? Yes, in some cases they can. Or is the thing that we think is a key activity really a key partner, or the thing that we think is a key partner really a key activity? Yes, that confusion can happen. And this is why I'm taking an opportunity to kind of segue from it a little bit. But when we think about key partners, this is what will others do? And then you think about key resources, how will you support? And then you think about key activities, what will you do? What are those things that have to happen? But also you have to identify your motivation inside a partnership if in fact you are going to partner with another organization. And the reason you're thinking about your motivation is because you want to understand to make sure that there's true business alignment. So then you have to ask yourself, well, what is the partner's motivation? Why do they want to partner with us? And if they do partner with us, what are they getting out of it from that? But then, like any good key partnerships, you have to identify then who does what inside that partnership. And then not only who does what, we have to think about in terms of, well, what are the core competencies that are required in terms of that key business? And when I say core competencies, sometimes there are certain things that that business needs or has that you don't have access to. And it's important to begin the process of thinking through those things. And then what are the core competencies that you need? What are your core competencies? Are there things that you offer the partner that they can benefit from? And then where do you add value to the partner? It's important, again, to think through partnerships as we think through this, because if we don't, then we have to identify what we're needing and where we're adding value for the partnership to be very well balanced. And then what kind of business are you building? We have to identify what kind of business that we're building to make sure that we're building something that can be successful for the business owner. And then again, we have to think through, do you need to look for other partners and for other competencies? How do you begin the process of identifying those things that you need? It's important as we think through the business model canvas, as we circle back around, what are the most important costs inherent in your business model? What are the fixed and variable costs? All these boxes, 9 boxes, again, help you to understand the business model, help you to understand what is the right business model for you to create, grow, and scale. Now, again, these boxes are connected together. They're truly linked. And the reason I say they're truly linked, when you think through the depth of the business model, again, it's about how do you understand the right side of the canvas, the customer, the value, the wheel that churns that helps deliver the value. How do you get your products to your customer? How do you begin to assess the value that you're offering to your customer in that regard? And some of you by saying, well, why do we want to use this tool? And why do we go through multiple business model canvases? Well, like I tell all startups, is because we want you to understand how to connect the dots. And when we think about the backside of the business model, where we're building the backbone and the foundation of the business, it becomes hypercritical for you to understand. But again, why do we use the business model canvas and why do we use this model? Well, because we want you to fail fast. The faster you fail, the quicker you'll get to building something that you actually want, to deploying the thing that actually gets adopted. To accomplish this, we use this tool, this process called evidence-based entrepreneurship. You're doing customer discovery with the hopes of understanding your customer so that you can understand the unique thing and the problem that you're trying to solve. But how do we get through evidence-based entrepreneurship and what are we trying to do? Well, you do that by talking to customers and listening to their problems and their concerns and listening to all their deep and intimate issues. But you first start off with that understanding of what problem are you testing? And you start off with a problem statement, somewhat of a statement of belief about the thing you think is wrong. And it's about how do you navigate through this? Now, I will tell you this, the business model canvas works, and most of the world's global successful startups have used this very simple 9-box tool, the lean startup methodology, to really solve a true core problem. But I will tell you this, doing customer discovery, using this methodology for the first time might feel like a little bit like this for some of you, right? A bit of a maze, trying to navigate your way through the maze. You know there's success out there in the place of Eden representing the success of a business, and you want to get there. But leveraging these methodologies and these tools will help you to go about doing this. But I will tell you one quick way that you will not be able to get there and what will prevent you from being a success if you focus solely on your technology. If you focus only on that innovative thing that you do and that you create, you will really misinterpret and misunderstand the consumer. So the goal has to be on a total focus on the customer's problem and the pain. There's two questions that I want to that stay into your mind and leave you with as we come close to the close of this presentation. It's what are the challenges and where are the opportunities? If you focus on where are the challenges and where are the opportunities, and you leverage and utilize the lean startup methodology, and you leverage customer discovery and use the tool of the business model canvas, it'll bring you to a place of building something successful. I love how the story of the innovator by James Dyson. He says, like everybody, we get frustrated by products that don't work properly. But as design engineers, we do something about it. We're all about invention and improvement. And so it's so important, and I'm sure all of you on this Zoom link have gotten frustrated by products that don't work properly, and you are charged with doing something about how to fix it. But let's use the tools and the methodology to really use the laboratory notebook to figure out how do we truly solve the problem and solve it in a way that's solving at scale. Building a business is not easy. If we think about where most of you might start, we start at this place we call problem solution fit, where you reasonably identified a customer, you reasonably identified a solution, but you're not quite at product market fit yet. You're just still trying to figure out whether or not are you really solving a problem or a pain. But the more customer discovery you do, it gets you closer to possibly product market fit, the better you understand about your market, and ultimately getting to a place of business model fit, where all the 9 boxes are green, you're ready to rock and roll, and you're ready to build something successful. But I want to leave you with this one thing. Keep in mind that everything on the business model canvas is all guesses and questions. The way you get answers to those questions is you go talk to people. You use the scientific method and evidence-based entrepreneurship. What do you want to learn? Who do you want to learn it from? And then what are you going to do with the information and what you learn it? How do you build around the customer to better understand their problem, to better understand their pain? Once again, my name is Nakia Melecio, and thank you so much for allowing me to spend this time with you to talk about Lean Startup and how to use a tool and a methodology to build something so successful. So I'm going to stop sharing right now, and we have some time to take some questions.
Okay. So some people in the audience made some questions. They said,
Yes.
how Tauhidul said, how can I ensure that my product creates value and that customers will purchase it at the right price? Sometimes, even if we conduct surveys on target customers and they commit to paying a certain amount to solve their problem, when we actually produce the product, they may not be willing to pay that amount for a startup company's product. They are ready to pay more for a branded company like Apple, but not for a new company. Big companies can sell simple items at high prices, but startups cannot sell innovative solutions at those prices. How can I be certain that people will truly pay for the solution?
Yeah, so the certainty, great question, right? And so, the thing is you honestly have to find out who are truly your customers. It's very unlikely, unless you just have a bunch of cash sitting somewhere, that you'll build a company to compete with someone like an Apple. But the question is am I really trying to compete against an Apple, right? Or am I really just trying to find the customer, find the problem and the customer that really benefits me? To give an example, and there's a hand feature here on Zoom. If any of you can tell me that you've ever seen a Bugatti or a Lamborghini or a Ferrari commercial or a Gulfstream 5 jet commercial, then raise your hand in the hand feature. You have not, because they know who their customer is and they know who their customer market is. And so they advertise to that person. I doubt very seriously that any of you seeing that Lamborghini or Bugatti or G5 and says, hey, there's a bunch of people on Zoom today who probably want our car or want our product. Let's reduce the price so they can afford to buy it. They're probably not going to do that, right? Because they know who their target market is and their target customer. And this is what the customer discovery process does. It allows you to understand who your proposed customer is, and it puts you in a place to understand. And this is why we do customer discovery. Don't ever devalue your product or use price as a strategy for acquiring customers, because Bugatti and Lamborghini are certainly not reducing their price of their car so they can get to more customers, right? Their price is what it is because they know who their customers are. You need to figure out who your customers are so that you can align your price to your customers. And this is why the customer discovery process is so important. It allows you to do that deep dive to understand who are those people that are our customers and how are we actually solving their particular problem. This is why we navigate through the customer discovery process to get to that particular point. I will tell you this, pricing is very difficult to get right in terms of any startup. You price yourself right, you're a rock star. You price yourself wrong, you will self-cannibalize your business just as fast as you got in business. But using the tool of the lean startup methodology helps you to understand the process and being able to build a successful business. Much like you have to test the problem, you're going to have to test pricing as well by looking at how much they paid before, looking at what they've done before, looking at are they willing to buy a new solution? Is the pain big enough for them to adopt something new? A great question.
Okay, thank you for answering that question. We have another question from Mahmoudul. How does a product telemetry data affect future product of that company? And can a company fully rely on their telemetry data?
So I will get then. Data is everything about data, whether it's without knowing the context of your business or the context of the scenario that also I'll deal with just what you're proposing here. I don't care what product it is, whether it's an iPhone, whether it's a car, or whether it's a new software. Data helps you, or just even the specifics of that information in the question that you're asking. You use evidence, again, to support what direction you should go. That evidence helps you to determine whether or not the information is sufficient enough for you to build something, not build something, to make something so more efficient, to decreasing something. All these things become hyper important when you're building a technology or a solution. So don't get so focused on the technical outcome of things, but get focused on the customer and make sure that you're understanding things from their perspective. When you think about in terms of why Elon Musk created the Tesla, well, when we know it's a great car, we know it's important, but what is he really testing here? Is it about building on a new electric car? Or is it about testing and building a sustainable battery for future cars down the road? So does it become, let's build this advanced prototype so we can test the solution of how do we test advanced batteries? Again, it's about where is the customer in that regard. Way too often, data is important, but it becomes more important in terms of how are they using the data? How are they consuming the data? How has the data helped inform them? What happens if they don't have the accurate data? What are the consequences if they don't use the data that's presented to them? Again, so let's turn those thoughts into questions to better understand what are they doing or not doing and the consequences and the pain. And then who does it impact? And then not only who does it impact, but then how do we make it better for that customer if they're going to adopt? Because value needs to be big enough to change customer behavior. While I get your question, again, I turn it back to let's focus on, well, what's the real problem with the current data use, how they're using it, and what's the importance of that, and then why are they needed to make decisions based on telemetric data?
Okay, thank you so much. There's another question for you, and it is, are there similar models, BCM, for nonprofit with social impact? This is a question from Farhana.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are several different types of business model canvases. For instance, there is the mission model canvas, which is particularly used a lot in for like Hacking for Defense or nonprofits, where it's usually based off of, understanding the philanthropy, where you change the customer segment to beneficiaries. And so there's a mission model canvas, there's the Hack for Defense canvas, there is the lean startup canvas, there's a business model canvas. There are several different business model canvases, depend on what method you're trying to use. But honestly, the business model canvas is pretty universal because we can change out the customer into being multiple different things. In terms of the value, if you're using it from a nonprofit, the value might not necessarily be the thing that they're, well, I'm going to get 20% this. It might be, well, we're hoping to improve health by access, that might be the value to that particular beneficiary or that particular customer. But yeah, the tool, there's multiple different types of business model canvases to use for social impact as well. And you certainly can use a business model canvas, but the mission model canvas is another canvas that a lot of nonprofits use a lot.
Okay, thank you, Nakia. I don't know if there are any other questions from the team on the participants. We're going to give a few seconds in case someone has another question.
Awesome. Hey, listen, Hana and team knows how to get a hold of me if there is any additional questions. I am happy to answer any additional questions via email or resources that you may need. I appreciate you all having me today, and I'll turn it back over to your team.
Thank you, Nakia. We learned so much through the examples you gave. It was very easy to understand everything, and we're very grateful for giving us your time today. We would love if everyone could please turn on your cameras and smile so that the team can take a screenshot. Okay, thank you everyone for joining, and we would love if you could fill out the feedback form to improve the session. Thank you, Nakia, and thank you everyone.
Bye-bye.